seem to fall to the floor.
Hello, welcome back to Pen Talk. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to make a quick look at a pen I did a recent video on, and I think I need to explain to my viewers that this pen does have a major design flaw in it. So I've noticed that just in a day the nib gets gunky at the end, which to me is dried ink. The pen writes, but that's certainly not something you want to look at each time you uncap it. So another viewer mentioned that this thing easily disassembles, so I used my trusty Phillips head screwdriver with a little bit of a long shank there. The screw came out very easily. The little plastic logo, it screws into that brass screw, and then that goes into the cap. So we're going to use some of my silicone sealant that I tried once before to stop a 992 leak from the cracks in the plug at the end. So I'm just going to coat the screw, the threads here where this goes in, and the clip, so when it's all assembled it's airtight. I don't think this is ever going to be a great long-term pen, because even with this all sealed up there's a large area in there, and each time you cap and uncap you're going to get some type of evaporation. Hopefully it'll be reasonable and we won't have any more crud at the end of the nib. So it's sad that they didn't spend an extra few cents while they're assembling this, design a cap liner to go into the cap that would have decreased the amount of air that the nib is exposed to, and also sealed up this whole assembly. It now has adhesive on it and reassembled. I use these interesting little forceps to hold the nut so I could lower it in and position it properly without getting that adhesive on the inside of the barrel. As we know from my 992 experiences, it's pretty sticky. So in addition to making certain that that screw is in there and is all glued around it, the other leakage is going to be where this clip inserts into the cap. So I had to put some adhesive around there. I'm not certain if I put enough in there to stop the the air exposure and the nib getting crusty. If that doesn't work, then I'll just fill the top with adhesive or glue, and that'll certainly seal it up. But then it'll preclude from ever removing the nut and repairing the pen. When you do this, if you do this repair, just make certain you put the logo back in so it lines up with the clip. We wouldn't want Fig Boot to be upset with that being out of alignment. Well over a week since I tried my sealing experiment to fix the nib drying out on this Lanbitou 3059. Since then I received the crystal version, which is impressively nice. One of the things with a clear acrylic like this, it's going to show up any flaws in the molding or in the injection of the plastic, and keeping that transparency is not an easy thing to do, but they've done a nice job with that. You got your transparent feed and section, but sadly I have to give this pen a not recommended rating. It's the first time I've ever done that. So this is the one I've worked the most on. This is the one that I've had filled up with ink. So after I did my adhesive in there to seal it up and put the screw in place, it still dried out. It didn't get crusty, but the nib wouldn't write after setting for a day, which is not acceptable, and you had to prime it a fair bit amount with the piston. So this one I filled the top of the cap with my clear adhesive. So what I did was I took my Gorilla crystal clear glue and I put a bunch of it in the top of the cap about 1/8 of an inch thick. So that totally seals up that screw. And there's no air leakage now coming from the top. You can see the light doesn't even go all the way to the top now because of that plug of glue that's in there. So I'm satisfied that this is as airtight as it'll ever be. And I think the sad part is if they'd have just spent a few more pennies and put a cap liner in there like Twisby does on their Eco, that should have solved the problem of the nib drying out. But now we got this large cap with a large amount of air in it and a nib that just can't retain its ink. So this is completely sealed off up here. So there's no air leakage there. You have the O-ring here, which should, seal up well against the cap. But sadly, after setting for a day, you try to write with it, it doesn't write. Okay, you can see what effort it took to actually get a flow out of this. I mean, once you get the flow going, it's great. The other thing you might notice is this is not the original nib. I got a Lamy Broad in black. Needless to say, it cost more than all these pens put together. But, this ink, I really enjoy it, but with a fine nib, it left a lot to be desired. I mean, it's great, but, having to work it after just a day of sitting is not acceptable. I think the real key is the fact that there's a lot of air in this cap. So even though I may have it sealed, there's just enough air to dry out the nib and the feed. So when you try to write with it the next day, if you let it go more than a couple days, you literally have to run the piston and reprime it. You can see how that ink is going up there. So, not a good design. I really am dissatisfied. I mean, I'd like to like this pen more than I do. That wasn't good to do on telephoto, but you get the idea. So I have to give this not recommended. It's not worth it. There's so many other pens in a similar price range that have similar features that don't dry out. The 618, the 698. I've done a lot of reviews on them, but this one, sadly, I have to say, don't buy it. So, thank you for watching. I wish I had better news, but I tried what I could and it didn't work. So hopefully there's better pen experiences in your future. Enjoy every day. Enjoy your pens. Right on. Bye.